Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Integrated Care Partnership. It's great to have you all here. A particular welcome to Adam Doyle, who's here for his first meeting. You're very welcome, Adam. And again, placing on record our thanks to your predecessor for his work. And I know there's a number of people here who are substituting for others and some who are here for specific items. So you're all very welcome here. We've got Anjum Ghosh online, who will be communicating through the power of telepathy or text message, one or the other, to Ellen, who's here in the room with us as well. We're hoping to get through and finished by 2:30. That's the plan, so we'll try and stick to that collectively as much as we can. We've got a number of apologies noted. Importantly, for the point of quorum, we've got apologies noted from both Lyndon and Diane, which means we are not quorate from that perspective, although it's great to have Georgia here substituting. So we do have a political voice from KCC, but constitutionally, it means we aren't quorum today. Also, apologies from Theresa Murray. I think Theresa and Diane are in the same place in SW1. I'm sure they're having a great time doing what they need to do. And other apologies have been sent through and have been noted. So we are not quorate today. So it's just worth stating that to begin with. Declarations of interest, obviously they have been noted. Could I encourage all colleagues just to, because again there's new people here, just ensure that they are up to date, as always, thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting on October, colleagues happy that I signed the record of the previous meeting as accurate? Thank you very much. And the action log is there. There are no outstanding actions for consideration. So that moves us on to the first substantive item of today, the statutory partners update. We've got reports coming from Ellen on behalf of KCC, from David on behalf of Medway Council. But again, we'll hand over first to Adam for an update from NHS Kent and Medway. You're very welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Chairman. It's nice to see you all again. So this is my first ICP meeting, so thank you for inviting me. And I wanted to begin by recognising the very warm welcome I've had into Kent and Medway since being with you for the last 7 weeks. And what I thought I would do is give a brief highlight of the things that I'm focusing on in my time here and what I've seen so far. The first thing I would say, though, it recognises a very clear partnership meeting. I've been struck by the level of partnership working and requirements for people to really want to lean in to help people in this system. So I'm really pleased by the work I've seen going forward. However, the NHS in Kent and Medway is not without its challenges. And as part of my appointment, I've also been working very closely to understand the key drivers of some of the issues of our system. And it's probably important to recognise that looking at the operational performance of the system, we tend to, in the NHS, look at things through a quality, performance, financial and operational lens, with always putting our people and our public at the centre. And in that context, there are some challenges that the NHS in Kent and Medway is experiencing. The first is the scale of challenge when it comes to the fundamental underpinning financial affordability of the system. And I'm currently in the process of working with NHS England to commission a drivers of the deficit piece of work, which will ascertain the true scale of the underlying deficit of the system. That will aim to report at some point to the system within the first quarter. As part of our planning process, we have to submit a second plan midway through February. So I'd want to make sure that all the NHS provider organisations are clear what they're signing up to in the context of their affordability going forward. So that's a key thing we're focusing on. And whilst it's about patient services and I'm leading with the money, it is a proxy measure, in my opinion, of the system and how it performs. So there are some other key data points for colleagues to be aware of. We spend, against comparator groups, 2% more on acute services than other parts of the country and our comparator groups. We spend 2% less on mental health services and against our comparator groups, and in certain areas about 1% less in primary care. And when you sort of look at those numbers, when I look at the complaints I'm reading, a lot of correspondence with political leaders locally, you kind of see some of those things manifesting in how our communities experience NHS. So there's work to do to kind of right-size that going forward. There will be choices, however, the NHS will need to make to therefore respond to that going forward. But of course, we'll follow due process for all the areas to get that right. As a result, we're therefore describing a 3-year journey of reset, recovery and transformation for the NHS. And there'll be 6 main pillars that we're working on across that health and care community. And there are 3 that we call our kind of main driver pillars, and then 3 that underpin that. So the first one, which is I think really prescient for today's meeting, is neighbourhood health and what that means. And of course, keeping our communities healthy and well, looking at life expectancy, outcomes for our community. We know about the significant life expectancy gap that we've got across the system. So it's really important that the NHS is clear what its role in neighbourhood health is, but how it works with the broader health and care, VCSE, charitable sector, how we therefore have a robust neighbourhood model that our communities understand. But we've got a job to do, but a job to do in partnership with colleagues in that. But we would be expecting to look at, in that model, the people that we know are likely over the next 5 years to probably require what we would call an admission to hospital via an ambulance call out, or because maybe their care needs changed. Our job as an NHS is to identify those people to try to minimise that going forward. So our new neighbourhood model is really important to get that right. We need that model to be clinically led, and therefore part of my challenge in arriving here has been how clinically led is that model of care, because if our clinicians want to change it, it's more likely to have an effect. Second bit is the acute transformation. So when I say we've got a 2% increase amount of funding to the acute services, it's really important then that we're clear about what does that change look like. And I'm asking all of our acute colleagues to think fundamentally differently about the services they offer and how they offer them going forward. Third bit is the ICB is changing, and therefore it needs to respond to its strategic commissioning responsibilities. And then the 3 things that underpin that: a digital strategy, a financial framework, and also a different approach to how we work with our people. So that's kind of where we're going to. We are the NHS, so we like a plan. There are many plans that we're writing at the moment, but we'll make sure that they go through the relevant committees in due course. The other key part I've got to work on is the future of the ICB. So we've got a 50% reduction in our running costs, and we're working with that at the moment. Colleagues will be aware we've got a voluntary redundancy scheme out, and staff are responding to that at this current point. And then we need to design a new operating model for the organisations going forward. But really, in summary, the key part for us now, I think, as an NHS, is to be really quite data and insights driven with what our communities say, work out how we can therefore get the funding allocations to the right part of the system, but doing each of those sort of shifts in tandem with our statutory and non-statutory partners to get that right. And that's my commitment going forward for how we take it forward. So I hope that's a helpful summary. The last bit is there'll be a review of all of this that we'll pull together, and at the appropriate time we'll therefore be able to take that to describe what I've encountered so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Adam and Ken. We look forward to seeing that information in due course. That'll be very helpful indeed. Let's then move to Ellen, who will give the update on behalf of KCC, and then to David for Medway. So Ellen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my name is Ellen Schwartz, Deputy Director of Public Health at Kent County Council, and I'm kind of jumping in for Anjan, who's there but can hear us and see us but can't speak. So apologies if I'm reading off the notes he just sent me. Updating you on 4 kind of major developments from KCC. The first one is Kent County Council's adult social care prevention framework, and I'm sure most of you will have heard about it before, which was recently approved and will serve as a practical tool to support the design, planning and delivery of preventative initiatives over a 10-year period, and that's 25 to 35. Aiming to sustainably manage the growing adult social care demand with a regular formal review to ensure it remains relevant and responsive to emerging needs. Throughout the development of the prevention framework, extensive engagement was undertaken with affected individuals, stakeholders, and partners. Engagement was undertaken with Kent residents, facilitated by adult social care, whilst a series of co-designed and co-chaired workshops were held with voluntary, community, and social enterprise sector, ensuring their active involvement throughout. The prevention framework was also shared through the existing partnership structures, including health and care partnership boards and the integrated care partnership subcommittees. On behalf of KCC, Anjan would like to extend a huge thank you to everybody who got involved in developing this incredibly important initiatives. Second update is on the learning disability and autism strategy. KCC has been working with the NHS, Kent and Medway, and Kent and Medway and Medway Council as part of the integrated care system to create a 3-year strategy for people with learning disability and autism. The strategy will explain how health and social care services plan to provide the right support for autistic people and those with learning disability. The strategy has been co-produced again with autistic people, people with learning disabilities, and with their carers and families. Several engagement workshops are now planned for December, some in person and some online. The purpose of the workshops is for people with lived experience to help write an important chapter within the strategy called The Right Support. We really want to hear from autistic people and those with learning disabilities, as well as from families and carers and professionals. The third update is on the 2025 Dementia Friendly Kent Awards. So KCC and Kent and Medway Mental Health NHS Trust are pleased to announce the launch of the 25 Dementia Friendly Kent Awards, which is now in its 8th year. The awards celebrate outstanding individuals, groups, and organizations that are helping to make Kent and Medway a more dementia-friendly place to live. From schools and voluntary groups to local businesses, care providers, health professionals, the awards recognize the many people who go above and beyond to support those affected by dementia. Nominations are open until the 31st of January 26, with anybody able to nominate an individual group or organization. And the final update is on the Kent-Marmot coastal region. We started to work with Sir Michael Marmot's Institute of Health Equity at UCL in October 24. The aim of the Kent-Marmot coastal region is to reduce health inequalities along the Kent coast by addressing the underlying social determinants. In the first wave of this, so the UCL Institute of Health Equity will support us to get this off the ground for the first 2 years, but the whole undertaking is going to last at least a decade. In the first wave of it, we are focusing on getting people into work as well as improving their skills for work. To simplify it, there are 3 layers. The top layer is aiming at achieving a cultural change to take, account of health inequalities and the connection with the underlying social determinants. The mid layer is system alignment. As we all know, there's a plethora of programs, government funding to get people into work, so to pull this all together and make sure they have this coastal focus. And then the ground layer is what we call a Marmot Accelerator projects, where we give seed funding to charities and small initiatives that demonstrate that they can get people into work with the aim of scaling them up across Kent. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ellen, for stepping in for Anjan, who we can see fabulously from the room, but your silence is sad. So thank you, Ellen, for stepping in for that. I'm going to hand over to David to give the third of the statutory updates. David, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Just a few things to update you on sort of specific projects and then sort of some stuff around the context. The first thing is neighbourhood health. So Adam mentioned the importance of a neighbourhood health and his update. And we're very keen in Medway Council to play our role in developing that. We have been developing a local pilot project looking at a slightly different age group to some other areas. So we're looking at working age adults, age 25 to 50, who are unemployed, who have complex chaotic needs, including substance misuse, mental health needs, long-term conditions, and are either homeless or in temporary accommodation. So a fairly complex patient group that uses up quite a lot of primary care resources. So if we can do something better for this group, we can help improve their outcomes and then also help relieve the strain on primary care. That can then have a knock-on benefit to creating more capacity, which means there'll be fewer people hopefully going to A&E. We've developed a core working group with representation from primary care, DWP, from housing, from adult social care, from public health, and from the voluntary sector. And we're still working on getting some representation from Kent and Medway Mental Health Trust. In terms of delivery, we're looking at aligning this to the currently developing adult social care MIST model. And if you want more details, Jackie can give you plenty of details about MIST. Working with Maritime Health, who are the first primary care service to pilot the MIST model. And priority actions around this piece of work is to work with the GP practice to identify that initial cohort. And we're also building in some evaluation. Another piece of important work that's happened over the last few months is Exercise Pegasus. This is the first of what's likely to be a sort of, I think, annual testing of responses to different public health threats. This one was based on a fictitious novel virus. We had very good multi-agency input into the response. There were 3 phases to it, spread over several months. It was a big national exercise. And I think it was an extremely useful exercise, really important for the system to understand sort of what we know, but also where the gaps are. The evaluation of that national exercise is ongoing, and there should be a report early next year. And that will then inform us about how we can improve our response to a potential future pandemic. When thinking about the context in which we work, a fairly significant thing that has happened over the last few months has been the submissions of proposals for local government reorganisation. So those went in on or by 28th of November. There were 5 submissions for Kent and Medway. These proposals will fundamentally change the way that things are organised within the Kent and Medway footprint, and therefore it's fundamentally important for the potential direct and indirect influences on health and well-being. In terms of the timetable, we're expecting that there will be a consultation early in the new year, and ultimately, the big prize for local government reorganisation is the next component, which will be devolution, where we will get more resources and more powers locally to organise things within Kent and Medway, including transport, etc. And all of these important wider determinants will ultimately have an impact on health and well-being. And then the other big thing for Medway is Medway Council's local plan, which I believe is due to be submitted imminently. We have got really good health and well-being and health inequalities strands throughout the local plan, so that it will shape planning in the future in Medway to encourage active lifestyles, create more sort of inclusive and connected communities, promote mental well-being, improve healthy food environments, and build health impact assessments into major developments. So this will have a really big, long-term, important influence on health and well-being within the Medway footprint. And I think those are probably the key things to update.
Thank you very much indeed. The one thing we can be sure of through local government reorganisation, if one of the 5 plans is taken forward, is we won't have 2 upper tier authorities. That's the one thing nobody's asking for. Not that it doesn't work perfectly already, for the avoidance of doubt. Anybody, any quick questions on those 3 report backs? So thank you. I'll take Angela first, then Shane.
Thanks, Chair. I did raise, I raised these things and I keep raising them till they happen. I did raise here before about the ambulance service, which is actually a key to a lot of these things. A PCSO type level for falls in elder, but young people have falls as well, but by and large, elderly people have falls in care homes. They're whisked off to hospital where they deteriorate and end up needing even extra care. And the suggestion that I raised was having a PCO type ambulance crew who can go lift that person up, sit there, have a cup of tea with them, make sure they're okay, and then say bye-bye. Now, that might take a little bit more time of an ambulance person, albeit at a lower level at PCSO, but it does mean they won't be rocking up at, queuing up at Medway or wherever else in the county, taking up valuable resources. And it's a win-win for both sides, for the individual, but also for the organisation. And I did raise this here, and somebody said, oh yeah, well, there's a new chief exec at CCAM. There's probably been another 3 since then. He could be looking at this, so I'm flagging it up yet again. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So the health equivalent of 101, basically. That's an interesting. I don't think I was in the room when you suggested that, so that would have been some time ago. But it's an interesting suggestion, and colleagues have heard that, so thank you. Shane.
Thank you, Chair. First, your regular reminder, we're not abolishing 2-tier authorities. We have a 1-level authority and a mayor authority, which my count is 1 and 2. Still 2 tiers. My question, first of all, was just some assurance, please, from Adam's report, if I can. This is the regular stint I do about data insights and the data industry that has cropped up. And I suppose my regular plea for such insights to be community-led as well as data-led, because if we just go down a data route or we just go down a clinical route, what we end up with is very clinically supportive services that actually have no basis in reality for the community. The examples I've given before include when there was urgent care centres that were going to be co-located with Down Valley Hospital. Great, sounds fantastic. Co-locate doctors, everyone together. Isn't that great? How are they getting there? How are they able to access that service if you live in a completely different part with no bus service, no anything like that, and not actually featured in the community? Clinically made sense. A dashboard looked great. Actually made no sense whatsoever to the local community. So my plea, I suppose, for that is if you were going down the whole data-led, it is community-led rather than data-led. It is based on reality rather than whatever the latest dashboard says. Because as we've got some dashboards later on, a regular question of mine, Chair, is so what? Great, fantastic. You've got some up and down arrows. Doesn't actually say context. There's no explanation as to what's been done. Why is it like that? No features of that at all. So dashboards have a purpose to a point to help identify problems, but they don't then come up with the solutions. So how are we going that community solution focus?
Thank you. I'll take Christine, and then I may come back to Adam for some thoughts on that. That'd be great. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Chair.
Question for Ellen. Yeah.
Great to hear. Like that? Yeah. Great to hear that there's a consultation on the autism strategy for the next 3 years, which is excellent. Obviously, I'm representing providers, specialist providers, again, also delivering autism services in Kent and Medway. And my question is, good that people are involved. That's absolutely what needs to happen. How do you involve the people that are hard to reach, the people with really severe and profound learning disabilities and complex needs, people that probably will be the biggest impact on services going forward? How do you get to involve them in shaping that strategy is my question.
Thank you very much. I can't see anybody else, so I'll take Adam and then Ellen, and then we'll round that item up. So Adam, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So if I take the first question about the ambulance service. So as we go forward with our neighbourhood model, we're already sort of looking at the population. We call it patient need groups, but we look at the particular different cohorts of the community. And we're describing a model through our community services, working with primary care, that risk identifies what we would call the most at risk 5% of the population. So the patients that in care homes would fall into that cohort going forward. What we want to therefore ensure is you've got a standardised offer across the system that therefore gets a standard response. So, for example, in our community services, we already have a urgent community response service that needs to be tied, I think, more strongly to the ambulance service, so we've got the right response going forward. But the patients who are currently in a care home who have an ambulance call, should the ambulance therefore go, should they then convey the patient to a hospital, we have to give ourselves a collective challenge about we could have really identified them much earlier on, and did we put the right thing in place? The other key part of that is, of course, our work with the care home themselves. You know, what happened there that made that get in place. So as part of the plan that I've outlined, the neighbourhood plan should be quite clear what the clinical model is, and therefore we can be really clear therefore how we respond to that, and therefore what is the role of primary care and the role of the community services to therefore respond to that. And then on data and insights, there's a load of international and national models for how you get this right. So we're a health system, so it is important we follow what the data says in terms of what is the best way to get clinically, robust services. As a clinician myself, it's really important that we look at what the data says. But then sometimes when you overlay that to a geography, it doesn't kind of work, if that makes sense. And our commitment is whatever new models we come out with need to be engaged with the community and be really clear about that. But in that context also, we've got to also recognise the world is shifting. And part of my role also here is to look at all the decisions that have been taken in the past or may not have been taken to go with the current financial issues we've got. How do you best make that work? But full commitment to engage, full commitment to work with the community, full commitment to look at what it's saying, but also full commitment to be honest about what the NHS can and can't do here locally too, so we can get that right.
That's very helpful and clear. Thank you. Ellen, just on Christine's point. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the question. And so this, of course, your first question was primarily about the learning disability and autism strategy, but you might as well also generalize them. So how do we write any strategy, and how do we ensure that those people who are affected by the strategy actually have input in it? And it's not always easy, because you have to make a choice between the individual view and contribution and a representative view. And so that is the challenge effectively. But so in 3 out of the 4 updates I gave, the principle of co-production is there. And the principle of co-production, so basically what you're asking, including those people who are affected by the strategy in the design of the strategy, and also increasingly in the provision of whatever services then ensue. So the mechanisms are often through the voluntary sector, because they have the best contacts to those people affected. So, and then as you go in the more extreme kind of autistic expression, it's through the carers, through the families, through those people who live and work with the affected individuals and have the best possible way of kind of translating that into the design.
Thank you.
Can I have another?
Come back quickly. Yep.
Thank you, Ellen. And I acknowledge this is not straightforward and easy at all, because obviously there's very specific communication elements to having co-production with a person that may not be verbal, for example. But those needs can be quite different, and therefore it is imperative that we do have a sufficient impact from those groups as well. I wonder, for that reason, whether or not it will be available in draft format for for comments at any stage for people that, for example, have the expertise working with this specific group?
You, Alan?
Just on that specifically, so there are a number of engagement workshops planned for December. I don't have the dates here, but we can easily take that away and give you the dates, so both in person as well as online engagement workshops. And they're specifically kind of to pull in autistic people and make sure that we give you that information.
Thank you. And finally, we'll take Sedi.
Thank you, Chair. Not to take anything away from Adam's earlier response to Shane's question, just to add for the committee's knowledge, we have recently strengthened the ICB board governance structure in response to the need for us as an ICB with a new remit around strategic commissioning to ensure that the voice of people that we're here to care for and support are heard at the board table. So we recently appointed a dedicated people and communities champion to the ICB board, and she, Bally Rogers, is chairing our people and communities advisory group. And the group's been designed in a way that members of the group, are also networked to the community. One of the expectations of ICBs within the new ICB blueprint is that we will do more to hear the voices of people we're here to care for and support as part of our commissioning work going forward. My sense is that as an ICB, we've worked really hard to engage with communities, but this takes it to another level altogether. I just wanted the committee to know that.
That's very helpful, and hopefully we'll give some further reassurance. It's good to hear. So thank you for that, and look forward to seeing their work as part of that ongoing progress. Thank you, everybody. Let's move on to the next item, and thanks to the three officers for really detailed updates. I think that's really helpful for everybody to hear. Particularly for colleagues who aren't here all the time, this integrated care partnership will look at, we have a number of shared outcomes. We'll do a deep dive on one of those at each of our meetings. This time we've got the wonderful, one of my top five, number 5. So I'm not sure who's going to lead off on this. It's going to be David, and then other contributions will be welcome. David, over to you.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, so for our integrated care strategy, we have a logical framework matrix, or log frame, with the 6 outcomes, and we make a logical connection between what we say we want to achieve, how we say we're going to achieve it, and how we know whether or not we've achieved it through the indicators. The indicators are not the only things that we look at for each outcome. We have lots of operational stuff as well, but they are indicators, and they're not targets either. They're indicators. They let us know over the long term whether or not we have achieved that outcome. Today's, within outcome 5, today's focus on the next item is on discharge. So this set of indicators just sets the frame for that discussion. And that's all I think I really want to say.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who wants to add to that before we move on to the substantive item that we're doing that deep dive focus on, making sure the system is ready? Shane, please.
Only following on from my previous point, but also the meeting, at the last meeting we agreed that the narrative would contain some of the issues I've just said, which was they would contain that context. It wasn't, the narrative seems to just say the national ambition is this, that, and the next, and that's fantastic news, get that, but then that is supposed to be the context was in there, and we agreed that at the last meeting, that this meeting would have, the narrative would be altered to have that level of context, the so what question, and hasn't happened. So my question is, why not, and so what?
David.
So yeah, so it's capacity issues. We just didn't have enough time between the last meeting and this meeting to get the information together for the different indicators at that level of detail.
And it's worth saying that for the next meeting in March, we've got a full chunky 3 months. So it's, whereas the last 2 have been relatively short scale, actually. So I think that needs to happen for the next meeting. Thank you. John, please.
Thank you, Vince. Thanks, David. I mean, just to bring, I think, a bit of life to the, and I think it links to Angela's question about frailty and also Shane's issue about the data. This is on pages 24, 25 on the metrics. And the problem of looking at them in isolation. On the 3rd of December, I went down to visit, as Chair of Kent Community Health, the Thanet Community Acute Response Team. And in that team, there are community health professionals as well as GPs and a consultant geriatrician from East Kent University Hospital who works half-time for the community. And in the work that they've done, and Jonathan probably is the expert on all of this, knows a lot more than me, they have reduced the number of admissions for frail elderly people, those over 80, by 40% to the hospital. So, and that includes people who have fallen and looking after them in their home, Angela. And that speaks to sort of the improvements on part of the improvements on 5.25, and they do this within the 2 hours when they go out. So they meet that. So it helps with 5.3, helps also with keeping people out of hospital. So it helps with that indicator 5.8. The converse side of that is there's that very important indicator about people waiting more than 12 hours in hospital waiting for admission. And you would have thought that with the work on that frailty reduction of admissions, actually and length of stay as well, because that team goes into the hospital and goes on to 5 wards to discharge people, that there would be a corresponding helpful indicator in terms of less pressure on beds at the Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mary, so the QEQM hospital site. They have not reduced their beds at all as a result of this, because the length of stay of other patients has gone up. So it shows you in terms of you've got to put it together so that something, on the one hand, there's some really good news. On the other hand, as a health system or health and care system, something's not quite working there because the hospital's length of stay is going up, and hence more people are waiting 12 hours or more for admission than there were before. So that's a sort of like example of the conundrum that we'd need, and it comes back to Adam's point about the challenges that we've got. It's a very good example of why are we spending more on acute than we should. That's a very good example of that. That's not to say it's going to be an easy problem to solve, but that's what we need to solve.
Thank you. I can't see anybody else. So helpful contributions, thank you. Challenge laid down with a full 3 months, even though we'll be celebrating Christmas and Hanukkah and everything else in between. It's still enough time to do that additional narrative. I think that is a very acceptable and right challenge to all of us collectively. Let's then move on to 7.2, which is the specific look. There's 2 presentations. I'm not sure who's going first, whether it's Kent or Medway. I'm going to look to the ICT team, because obviously both have been circulated with the papers, but I don't know if we're formally using them for presenting. Perhaps Jackie will step in first and then perhaps Paula afterwards. That's the order they are in the paper, so that would make sense.
Mark onto that, you're not getting out.
Mark will be there as well, don't worry.
Thank you. So we talked about the MISS team at the last meeting in October, but I just wanted to give an update on where we are with this at the moment. There was quite a lot of interest, and actually the work that the team has been doing to prevent admissions and support discharge from both acute and mental health wards has been significant. So I mentioned at the last meeting, the team was set up as a pilot in June. That was 6 months ago. It's a very small team consisting of 4 social workers and 3 social care officers, working very closely with colleagues in public health in Medway, as David just mentioned. The team is worked specifically with adults who experience multiple disadvantages, where there's been trauma, chronic risk, and there's system barriers. Lots of use of the words of the person won't engage, and therefore they get left behind. So this team is specifically working with people that are deemed not to engage. And actually, that work has led to some really, really positive outcomes. So since June, that small team has worked with 63 adults specifically. They've looked at how they can stabilise those people. That's around structured planning, relational engagement, and life skills development. And it's some things as simple as a person wants to know how to cook and learn how to cook. So there's a training plan to teach them how to cook, how to shop, how to manage their money, and so on and so forth. And that indirect intervention prevents crisis, it stabilises risk, it reduces those system pressures that we all know and talk about, and improves the outcomes across the wider workforce. We've learned a lot from that over that 6 months, and there's more that we can do, and we would like to think about how we can expand that team, and that is something that we're looking at. And we've identified those system gaps and the need to bridge those, so we are now starting to establish a missed strategic board, chaired jointly by Steve from the public health team and my principal social worker, and that's with the goal of bringing together the key stakeholders. So that's representatives from mental health, the ICB, probation, and the police, who are all already involved in part of that. Like talking about cases and actual examples and giving some real life behind this, because it's great talking about the numbers and what we do. But an example recently is somebody that's been on a mental health ward for a very long time. The outcome for that person was they had to go into supported living. There was no alternative. And actually, when Miss started to work with that person, what they learned about him and understood from him is that he just wanted to go home. And so they did that. They worked with him, and actually, he's gone home. He's having the best life with the Miss team supporting him. And he cannot believe that after the period of time that he's been on a mental health ward, that he's back in his own property. So that's the way that we want things to work, that real relational, structured approach in our ways of working. But we recognise that there's more we need to do. So we are at the moment creating a dedicated mental health discharge social worker, so that they can be on the mental health wards and start that planning from the point of the person before the person is ready for discharge. In addition to that, we are creating a housing officer post that's going to be on the acutes, both that will effectively work across all sites, so that if somebody comes into ED and their primary challenges around housing, that we've got somebody that can start working with that person immediately. Because what we see and what we know is people will be admitted, and it isn't until the point that they're ready to be discharged that we find that there's a housing problem. So we've got a number of things in tranche, including looking at a social worker in the ED department as well, so that we can do some prevention around admissions. I could go on, but I will hand over to my colleagues from KCC.
Thank you. I'll take Paula next and then Mark. Thanks. Paula, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the next item in your pack is around partnership working, and it focuses on discharge again, which is around two initiatives, joint brokerage and Home First. And again, it would be Mark and Jackie and myself that will take you through that. So in terms of joint brokerage, this is a project that's been kind of developed, recognising that as a system, as adult social care and the NHS were facilitating discharges out of hospital and not joining up as a whole system. So we've looked at how we can do that to facilitate those people who need to leave hospital that require a long-term assessment of what their needs might be. We recognise that when people leave hospital, they're not necessarily ready to make those decisions about what their long-term care might be. So that would be facilitating those discharges into a care home, which we call part of discharge to assess, which is called Pathway 3, and it's for those people to actually recover, so that we can then do that care needs assessment to identify what their long-term needs would be. Now, the joint brokerage is around how we do that together. So we, instead of doing it separately, we have one team that's now working across Kent and Medway, looking to do that across all of the acute hospitals. The discharges come out of the hospitals, the referrals are done through integrated care hubs, through a trusted assessment, and then they will contact the joint brokerage team, which is now being hosted by Adult Social Care, to identify those placements and facilitate those discharges. So we're looking to streamline how we do this across the whole system, so that we can have a better control of the market jointly. And we have got a number of phases that we are considering how we do that. So phase 1 has already been implemented, and that's been introducing a short-term ceiling cap, which is around a price that we're working with the market on so that we can have a more consistent approach. Phase 2 was setting up the joint brokerage team. That's now been in place, and that started on the 2nd of November, and that's working across the whole of Kent and Medway, looking at facilitating those discharges and arranging those placements. Phase 2 is looking at how we will be looking at the continuing healthcare element and what that might look like as a system. And phase 3 will then be looking at how we can do it from a community perspective. And Mark will talk about Home First in a minute, but I think although this is talking about discharges out of hospital, we recognise that we need to do a lot more to prevent people going into hospital, but we've kind of started here, because if we can free up some of the money about people going into a placement, we can then redirect that money into the community setting so that people can be supported in their own homes, which is ultimately our long-term aim. Just on that, I just wanted to note as well that we had a whole system workshop last week, I think it was last week, could have been the week before, where we came together to look at what is our strategic aim and direction around discharge pathways. And a lot of that was around, we've heard it before, we've absolutely better outcomes for people, but thinking about doing something as a whole system and where possible having a pooled or managed budget. Now that's part of phase 2 of the joint brokerage, where we are working as a whole system to identify what that could look like. So there's no discussion about money, it's all, we can support people to have a seamless discharge out of hospital. And I think that's it, unless Jackie wants to come in on any more of that. But that, in terms of joint brokerage, that's where we are. And we can come back about some of the outcomes of that workshop and how we want to look at the community response to keep people back well in their own homes at a later point.
Great, thank you. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to cover Home First in the next couple of minutes. It's probably helpful just to give a little bit of context. So Home First isn't necessarily something it's new. It's probably new for Kent and Medway, but it was first trialled in the North East by Sir Jim Mackey. So we looked at that model and we thought there's some elements of that which would work well in Kent and Medway. So we came together, and again, it's multi-agency working together, so the community, adult social care and the ICB working together to deliver better outcomes for patients. So we attempted to implement this as a pilot in the east of Kent as a sort of proof of concept. I think it's also just worth bearing in mind, because I think John mentioned around the long length of stays and the high numbers of no criteria to reside, and some of the challenges are getting those patients out of hospital. Traditionally, we've always put them into, as Paula says, the sort of pathway 3 long-term placements, expensive, not always best for the patient. So this approach was, could we take a cohort of those patients and manage them and support them in their own home? But that requires us to work in a slightly different way. So it requires adult social care and health to work more collaboratively. So that's what we've done. We've increased the capacity for the pathway 1 for those Home First type of patients. The benefits to that, apart from home is best, patients prefer being in their own home, is that it allows us to discharge patients in a more timely way. It doesn't take a long period of time to negotiate the pathway 3 bed. We can send them home, wrap around the care and support those patients, and deliver that care 2 or 3, even 4 times a day. As I've said, it involved all of the key stakeholders. We've got strong governance and good, strong working together. Some of the other benefits as well are the reduction in some of the duplications that we see and the constant handoffs. So you've got that single team that are managing that patient from discharge through to them being supported in their own home. We're in that place at the moment where we've done the pilot. We extended the pilot to cover more of East Kent, and that was an opportunity where the current or the previous Pathway 1 provider, we'd served notice on that contract, because we felt that we could, by working together, we could deliver a more cost-effective model. We also had a slightly different model in West Kent, so it gave us an opportunity to test two different models and see which was the better model, and one that we might roll out across the whole of Kent and Medway. If I'm honest, we had outcomes from that which I wasn't necessarily expecting. I thought the East Kent model would be much harder to set up, but actually it's proved to be slightly more resilient, I think, than the West Kent model around recruitment. And I suspect that's because you've got that sort of closer collaboration, you've got people working together. So I think there's some benefits to, as I said, to that East Kent model. I think the final bit that I'll just pick out on is the improved outcomes. So we've seen a 40% improvement on the previous provider on the outcomes, the independence of those patients, them not needing that costly long-term care. So I think we all recognise this is what we need to be doing more of, and I think we need to have a conversation as a system how we could enable a greater pathway one capacity by working together. And I know that Jackie and I have had some conversations around what could we do to mirror this model in Medway to give Medway system some help and support. So I think that's probably where I'll leave it, but happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. All three really helpful, detailed presentations. I'll take Jackie first. Danielle.
Hi, everyone. It's Jackie Cressati, and I'm speaking with my chair of the Mental Health Trust hat on, got various hats. Great initiatives. I hadn't actually heard about MIST, loved the sound of it. I just wanted to make the meeting clear about the scale of the problem, though, for us and the risk that it leaves for all of us and the people of Kent and Medway. So in the Mental Health Trust, about 25 to 30% of our beds are filled with individuals who are clinically ready for discharge. There are various reasons for that, some of which we have to own, you know, about being too slow to get something done, but quite a lot is around moving on to supported care, housing, and so on. And in fact, I had a quick look at the Medway figures. So even though there's this great initiative in Medway, our clinically ready for discharge has gone up, although the size is small compared to Kent County Council individuals. There's also something about the scale of being able to do this, I suppose, that I'm thinking about how do we really ramp up the scale of these exciting initiatives. And I'm also thinking, so you're talking about mental health representation, Jackie, and I'm thinking, well, actually, my board doesn't know about MIST, my executives don't know about MIST because I asked them, that the representation is at a local level, which can be very effective, of course, but there's something about strategically, are we really joined up so that as a board, we're really investing in a model in Medway, for example, a model in Kent, where we're kind of working absolutely joined up with our colleagues. So I just raise it in terms, I am positive about it all, but it's just the scale of the problem. And so for us, once we have that 30% of beds blocked, that means we are keeping people waiting in emergency departments for more than 12 hours, which is a risky situation. We're keeping people waiting in the community. We're sending people out of area, which we all know is bad for patients and their families and for outcomes. So I'm, be really keen that we kind of ramp up the initiatives that work and we kind of join it up very tightly so that we're really supporting you in every way we possibly can.
Thank you, Jackie. Jackie.
Thank you, Jackie. It's a shame that people didn't know because we actually did a letter out to share about MIST to exec. So it'd be interesting to see why that's not fed through. The reason that we've just started it is because it's a pilot. So if initially, thanks to our administration, it was an investment to see actually by bringing in additional resource to create that team and that capacity, would it do what we would expect it to? And, you know, as you'll see from that we have. I mean, I haven't spoken about money, but if I talk about 6 months with those 63 people, in total cost avoidance and cost savings is around £930,000. So, and that's not cost shunting. That is to the council. So what we needed to do is to see if it worked, and then to look at you know, whether we then look and can we upscale and what does that mean, and so on. What's been really interesting is, I'm going to get it wrong now, the new KMMH, the new mental health service, are really on board. So from a practitioner point of view, we struggled initially to get people in our MDT, so those multidisciplinary teams, but actually they've been really engaged and on board, and actually suggesting that a mental health colleague be part of that board, the strategic board that we're talking about. So I think my thinking at the moment is we need to get the board set up to look at what is it we need to do? How do we move this out? Investment is going to be a challenge, because obviously from an adult social care perspective in Medway, we are in a very, very difficult position financially. So if we want to scale it, we would need to look at, can that be done with partners? And that doesn't necessarily need to be money. That can be actually, is there resource that could be working in the team and really creating that multidisciplinary approach? What I'll do, Jackie, is I'll share some information with you. I'll also ask the team to share some outcomes, because MIST isn't going to be the answer to everything that you're talking about. Well, you know, with the beds, my operations manager attends those meetings, you know, regularly about the challenges. I'm on the calls. What we need to do is change the culture. There's a view of somebody coming out of a mental health hospital has to go into a care provision, and if that's supported living, that can take 20 weeks to set up, because it's somebody's tenancy. So we need to shift that and move people out of the ward into the community, and then look at, when we talk about that home first model, actually what's their long-term care and support need. And that's the gap there is at the moment, because there's nowhere to move them out of the ward to. So, but more than happy to discuss that and come and talk to you.
Thank you. I don't know what the collective noun of Jackie's is. An excellence of Jackie's.
Very good.
Sedi.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of observations, if I may. One, I was struck by the covering report where the equality, diversity and inclusion assessment suggests it's not applicable. Now, there may be good technical reasons why that is the case, but from an ICP perspective, we should be collectively seeking assurance that everything that we are doing drives that EDI, or equality, diversity and inclusion agenda. So it's a passing observation, no more. The other point is not in response to Shane's point about data, but recognizing the huge amount of work that is going on. I found this a little bit data light. I think there's a reference to the 40% improvement that Mark mentioned, but again, from an ICP perspective, recognizing that we are overseeing the progress of our integrated care strategy, it would be good to say, this time last year it was X, today it is Y, this time 6 months ago it was A, now it's B. And I just wonder, as part of that assurance piece for the ICP, whether we could have more data so we can monitor progress as we go. To that point, Chair, I'm also conscious that perhaps now we should be spending some time reviewing the integrated care strategy, because all of our worlds have changed so much since we approved it and it went through all of our various governance boards. So just as a placeholder to consider that at some point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and certainly for the final item of AOB and agenda setting, I think that's helpful to kind of put in the sand. I've got John and then Shane.
Just on Home First, I'm a great advocate, as is West Kent Health and Care Partnership and Kent Community Health of Home First. I think, if anything, Mark undersold it. Because actually, Sedi, there's a lot of data that I've seen, both at the Health and Care Partnership for East and West Kent and at our Community Trust, in terms of the benefits of it. And I think Home First is a really good example of health and care working together. It's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the patients, because this improves their chances of being able to stay in their own homes, assuming that's the right thing for them. Reduces actually, makes them more independent quicker for those who can. It reduces the cost for the local authority because there's fewer people going to nursing home reinvested in a P1, but it's cheaper. So there's a win for the local authorities. There would be a win on the NHS side if we were able to deal with the length of stay issue in the acutes, which is another matter. And local people have really taken to these roles. So when we went out to advert Kent Community in East Kent, we had 50 posts, we had about 150 applicants. We could have appointed way more than 50 people. There were a lot of people who were suitable who applied. And we get very good feedback from the people that have become Home First workers. So I think it's a really important initiative.
But such a good news story, apologies, should be shared with the Integrated Care Partnership. And that's my point. I think huge amounts of work going on, great outcomes. It'd be helpful for us to know.
Thank you. Shane.
Couldn't let it go, said you wave a red flag like that in front of me. I'm going to take it up. Actually, the counter to that is actually this is probably what we need more of. There is that deep dive, that depth, and I told that story. You know, the reason I didn't put my hand up, if I'll be blunt about it, initially was because actually it covered the things I've been saying. It actually shows a bit of story, shows the depth, shows the work that's going on underneath that data metrics. And I think we have a fear of if we don't have a pie chart or a dashboard, no one's doing anything. And what the context I think showed here is actually there is a good lot of work doing it, and actually the best practice that can be shared by others across the board to make sure that we can deliver for people. We can evidence this to constituents, to the residents, to show actually you say that's not happening, here's what is. It's okay saying, well, we've delivered this, have you, on the ground? And this sort of deep dive is equally, if not more important than something that goes on a scorecard. So a counter challenge back, Zeddy. I believe they're symbiotic. You can have both, but I think you need to have both. And I would argue more depth like this is important. This is one of the first times we've had such a lot of information, a lot of good practice, and that's what we need to showcase to residents. Because it's okay for the stats to NHS England, but we need to show residents the outcomes.
And not for the first time, Shane, we agree.
Thank you. And again, huge thanks to the three individuals who presented. I think if you think about, and this is not to downplay anything else we've ever discussed here or will in the future, but if you think about if I was to stop a man or woman in Chatham High Street and said, I'm on a thing called an integrated care partnership, what do you think that should do? It's what we've heard over the last 10 minutes in a very pure sense. Now, again, everything else we talk about is important and critical, but actually to, as Shane says, for the elected representatives around this table, for the people who we're accountable to through the ballot box, actually that is it. And again, that's not to downplay everything else, all the other shared outcomes, but in a very pure sense, integrated and care and partnership, this work is doing just that. So, yeah, very, very helpful to hear. And again, as always happy to shout more about it, share that best practice, and ensure that as a system as a whole, we are doing what we can to share that. And again, so thank you for that. Stephen, last contribution, because I'm terribly chairing, we're already a few minutes behind, but go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, this is a precautionary intervention inspired, I'm afraid, by the last thing that you said. But I take responsibility. I echo remarks that are made, not least because I think my own mother is currently benefiting from some of these particular interventions, and you can't say fairer than that. I'm told that there is a growing enthusiasm to visit hospitals that are far from people's places of residence because folk feel that they are getting attention there quicker than they would do if they visited at home because they can't get GP or other kinds of assistance for short-term immediate issues or things of a relatively trivial nature. And I'm simply asking, by precaution, and I hope that the answer is no. Is that a feature of the longer term issues where we hope that the coordination between stakeholders and partners for the sorts of issues we've been looking at through the last 10 minutes discussion in these much more intensive cases, are they absorbing all of the requirements that are needed comfortably, or are people, in fact, ringing an alarm bell that we need to be alert to because they're finding that they're not being attended to? I hope that the answer is no, but I feel that I need to ask. Thank you.
I'll come to you. I mean, I think there's a couple of bits there. There's something around the system as a whole, and again, nowhere is perfect, but there's some really good examples of, and you're right to raise the issue of people rocking up to A&E because the health system hasn't been accessible to them. Now, sometimes that might be about saying, actually, have we collectively, because we've all got responsibility for this, told them actually for these things, go and see your pharmacist first. I think in some parts of Kent and Medway, we've been really good at communicating that. In others, not as good. And on you go, the availability of seeing a GP when appropriate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So stopping people getting to that front door, and then as anybody who would want to interrupt me would say, for the vast majority of people, actually the health outcomes, the marmot stuff, which both Kent and Medway are looking at in different parts, that's about everything else that is done. So whether that's housing, whether that's employment, whether that's people living in poverty, you know, those are the things that will impact as well. I think what we see here is the other end of that conversation. So people who have access to the system and are now in a situation where they're being, I think, in my layperson's view, being treated in a way which is better, most importantly, better for them, but actually better for the system and more efficient for the system as well. Those are good things too. So hopefully that's helpful. Thank you for raising that. Thank you for that. Obviously, spoiler alert, for the next meeting, probably, I suspect, outcome 6 will be the next one that we take. Not to be boring and numerical, but we will do that. And I think the point around data versus story, narrative, I think is important, and trying to strike that balance is an important one. Let's move on. Thank you very much to colleagues who have brought this next item forward. I'm sure colleagues have seen it, but I would refer colleagues to, I think, page 2 or slide 2. This is a difficult, sensitive issue. If people feel they need to step out at any point, please do. And of course, as we'll hear, we've done some amazing work as a community across our region over the last, well, actually the last couple of months, if you think about a well-known bit of gold that's travelled around, and much, much more. Really welcome Jess and Sarah to give us an overview of what we're going to be doing for the next 5 years. Over to you.
I'll kick off. I'm Jess Mukherjee. I'm consultant in public health in Kent County Council, and there's Sarah here, who you all know, who's your Medway lead. We've got quite a lot of slides, so I'm going to go through them really, really quickly because I think the most important thing is the discussion. So this will be a right rollicking ride through suicide prevention. So just to caveat this, this sits within the backdrop of something Adam was saying, which is the 2% less money in mental health. We had a mental health summit in March, I think everyone remembers, and we had our mental health needs assessment presented there, which shows some very stark figures. So if we can have the next slide. Just to sort of say also that our strategy is evidence-based and meets national expectations, not only that it's seen as a sort of national leader, really, in suicide prevention. I want to bring governance and accountability back to this group in in the discussions, because I think there's probably more that we can do together in this. But we have built up a very strong multi-agency system. Right, let's go to the data. In the previous slide, you can see that across England, the rates are increasing slightly. So we've got a difficult backdrop. That's also mirrored in the southeast. And in Kent, we are reducing slightly, but we're still way above the national average. I think Medway have made some headway, actually, from the last three-year rates. However, I think we've still got quite a way to go. Also, the data within Kent, because Kent's a large patch, masks quite a lot of internal inequality, particularly on the coast. And I think, you know, the conversation around inequalities in Marmot will be really important. One of the things that I want to drive forward in the next year, in fact, is more localised prevention approaches within each local area. We've already started definitely in Medway, where you've made some really good local improvements, and we're starting in Thanet as well, where we're creating our own localised programme. But of course, you know, we've also got very different situations in Gravesham, for example. We were in the Gurdwara recently, and I know that the Sikh community there have got some really kind of serious issues that we need to localise. So not one size fits all. And that's some of the kind of issues that we've got across a large patch in Kent. One of the other things I think I want to highlight from this presentation is this sort of three key things I think that we can, that we do. Firstly is system leadership. And I think there's more that we can do together on system leadership. The second one is we have local funded programs. So, for example, we have the Release the Pressure campaign. We have a local funded series of grants that we give out to local organisations. We've got networks. We've got networks of about 250 people, all networked across Kent, working together on this, because it's not just a team of 4 people sitting in Sessions House that are doing all of this work. It's absolutely spread out everywhere. I think most of you will be, I hope, aware of the baton of hope that we brought to Kent, and hugely important when we consider that the suicide prevention strategy is in the business of hope. It's in the business of keeping people alive. So a lot of people say, oh, it's a very depressing area to work in, but actually you flip that on its head, we're actually a programme of hope. So the baton of hope was really important because it also aligned itself to the people who are impacted by suicide. So for example, in terms of numbers, last year we had 131 deaths in Kent and Medway, and that's an increase from the previous year. But that 131 people becomes a far bigger number when you think of the parents and the cousins and the friends and family that are impacted on this. So not forgetting, it's very important to look at stigma reduction and bring the confidence and ability of people to have conversations about mental health and suicide prevention. And that stigma reduction that was showcased really in the Baton of Hope is really important to have that. We've got a really good film. We can't show it, we don't have enough time, but I urge everybody to have a look at that. It's a very moving film. The other thing I'd like to point out in this presentation is continuous learning and co-production. There are things that we've learnt over the 6, 7, 8 years that we've been doing this that are quite startling. So, for example, we learnt from our real-time surveillance that 1/3 of all suicides are contributed to by domestic abuse. That wasn't nationally recognised prior to our work in Kent and Medway, and now that's now part of a strategy, a national strategy to deal with that. We also, about 20% involve drugs and alcohol. And I think Jackie talked about some of those huge complexities that are faced by people, and that becomes a very important part of our programme as well. So behind every data point is a story of hope. I think that's really important. We have to do this with people along the way. And it brings up issues such as, what do you do with somebody who is in a who has suicidal ideation? Are we equipped to have those conversations? But there are also some system issues that we must get better at together. So we know that the suicide and prevention strategy also has the issue of self-harm in there. And yet we don't have a full picture of self-harm across Kent. I think the data is very confusing, and I think we really need to sharpen that up. We also want to prevent the second attempt. Now, when somebody goes into hospital or anywhere declaring that there is a self-harm episode, what happens 48 hours later? What happens 72 hours later? There are nice guidance around that. Are we following that nice guidance? But more importantly for me, what happens 6 months later? What happens a year later? Because we know that from our data, 70% of the people who complete suicide are not known to mental health services. Well, what does that mean? That means that they're not known to secondary mental health services. If you dig into that data a bit more, quite a few more are known to primary care services. And even more have, if you go back through the data, and this does show whether we do audit every suicide, we don't know, but if you go back through the data, many more people have had a previous suicide attempt, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And it's about that continuous care as well. So these are some of the system actions and the call to actions that we can have in terms of adding value and our priorities going forward. The other thing I think also to mention is, unfortunately, attempted suicides are increasing in a slightly younger population. So traditionally, I don't like to use that word traditionally actually, suicides are in, I suppose I'm looking around the meeting room, our age group, working age up to 60. And now the suicide rate is dropping, so younger adults are unfortunately, you know, so actually we need to make sure that our services are understood by the people who need them. I think I'll stop there because it would be really good to have a discussion.
Thank you very much. Sarah, was there anything else you wanted to add before
I beg your pardon, Sarah, yeah.
Please, okay. And then I'll come, I've got Christine and Shane first, but Sarah, over to you first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm really encouraged that the suicide prevention rate in Medway has come down from 12 to 10.3 over the last couple of years, but I don't think we can be complacent. I'm very encouraged by some of the initiatives we talked about already today. So the MIST team, the work that they'll be doing with most complex and vulnerable groups. We see time and time again the recommendations that come out of our safeguarding adult reviews. Those themes are repeated, that complexity, that falling through the cracks of systems, people not being picked up, handovers not happening. We're working on a Kent and Medway suicide prevention protocol to better integrate working between the Mental Health Trust and social care. So here we are, an integrated care partnership. One of our big asks from the committee today is around strong leadership for better integration between mental health services and substance misuse services. We still see people coming through onto our suspected suicide surveillance data who have been handed round and round services again and again. So that's something we really want to focus on. I'm really hopeful that neighbourhood health, and it's not going to be the panacea for all the issues that we have in our health and social care system, but I'm really hopeful that we can see an improvement on how depression in primary care is managed, how self-harm NICE guidance is followed. and continued investment into the social determinants of mental health, because we know from our real-time suicide surveillance data that about 27% of people have a health condition which is impacting on their suicidal ideation. So long-term health conditions, dementia, recent cancer diagnosis. So there's better integration again between physical health and mental health that we can build on that work. Relationship difficulties as well. These aren't things that can be managed within one part of the system. So there's a lot of data that we have, and a colleague at the end here, is it Shane? I can't see, sorry, but we were talking about data right at the beginning. I'm looking back now, I'm doing a piece of work, joint strategic needs assessment for Medway around suicide prevention. I'm looking back at where we were 5 years ago. We have come a long way. We didn't have a real-time suicide surveillance system 5 years ago. That has been really helpful for us with insights. We didn't have a specialised bereavement service for suicide in Kent and Medway. We do now. We've come a long way in 5 years. There's something we can learn around data of near misses. Nowhere across the system do we capture the near misses. If you work in a sector like engineering, near misses are so important, also within acute setting. When it comes to near misses across the system, we aren't sharing that information between the Coast Guard, between Kent Fire and Rescue, between the mental health services. So we need to think about how we can be really innovative in sharing that information, because we have the real-time data, but that's after a fatality. We want to actually be able to work backwards from that. So that's a really interesting piece of work. We should be considering how we work together as a system on that. That's probably all now. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll take Christine first, and Shane, Govinda, and Jack.
Thank you. I'm just really impressed with all the amazing work that's going on here as well. And I missed my chance to say congratulations to Jackie and the Medway team for doing that amazing work as well with MIST. But my question that arose from your presentation, fascinating data and all the work that's going on, is there any way that we could look at resilience training, perhaps look at schools, what they could do to see if we could prevent more?
Shall I just come back on that? Yes, we've got a children and young people's subgroup, and they look at that quite regularly. I think that's absolutely one of the things that if I would have harped on a bit longer, I could have mentioned the issue of online behaviour and online risk, which is huge. And so we need to look and tackle that. In terms of personal resilience, I mean, we used to be across Kent, and I think Medway does their own one, but we used to have a 6 ways to well-being, which is a kind of how do we get people to feel more resilient? And this is part of having conversations with people, tackling loneliness and isolation. We've now got health alliances across Kent as well, and it's really important for those localities to link each other up and bring that resilience in as well. So yeah, there's lots of things we can do, and I think quite excited for 2026.
Thank you. Shane.
Thank you very much, Chair. A couple of observations first on what was said. One, I agree about the online harms issue. I think we still don't talk about it enough. It's still the Wild West out there. And I think it's one of those things we're going to have to get a grip of as a society, because there are some real dangers for, especially some of our children and young people out there. And how do we make sure that we keep our young people safe? It's a safeguarding matter, really, in the long run. And the near misses stuff on the data, absolutely. It's the why, isn't it? We need. It's not just about capturing the number of how many near misses. We need to understand the why if we're truly to help that. The paper was asking about commenting on the draft mission and vision, Chair, and I think it's great we've got this. With 149 respondents, and there's a whole section on children and young people. My question and challenge is how many children and young people are involved in this, because there's I have some problem with the children and young people must be resilient enough to cope with life's normal up and downs. And anyone that's worked with children and young people, as I have, and there are many in the room that have, that's quite a subjective term, given that young people can be preloaded with issues at home. You've got to start where the young people are at. And it's interesting, we don't talk about adults in that same language. They've got to be resilient enough. But in the very next sentence, we can't prejudge in that way, especially when we're dealing with such a sensitive topic. Why should they be resilient to cope enough, but adults don't need to be? And we need to be a little more sensitive, I think, on that, and actually be more supportive in this space, given the sensitive nature of the topic. So I think some rewording on what is quite a subjective thing, because we're still effectively, it sounds like, doing it to children and young people, rather than with children and young people. If we don't understand those needs and their pressures as they are at the moment, how can we possibly hope to prevent that, which goes back to your hope. My final comment, Chair, and I see you've got one, I see David's got one, and my one is to talk about domestic abuse and the White Ribbon campaign. Mine's on my coat. It's such an important point. We don't feature enough. I'm wondering if in the fuller document, the White Ribbon campaign and the work that's done to this is mentioned throughout this to highlight such important work.
Shall I just come back quickly?
Yes, please. Thank you, Shane. Yes, thank you.
I do urge you to read the whole document, because you'll find quite a lot of information in there, particularly around trauma-informed ways of working, and co-production, which is the way we work with young people.
Thank you. And the point around White Ribbon, I think that's helped more generally. I think not every council is accredited. We've just been re-accredited, I should proudly say. For example, I'm not sure if KCC is accredited. I'm looking, it'd be helpful to seek some views on that, because I think if certainly that's not the case, that would be something I'd urge them to consider. I think it's an important message it sends. And certainly there are other public bodies like Kent Police who are accredited as well. Let's move on to Govinda, and then I'll take Jackie.
Very informative paper, and I think in terms of the data, in a subject matter like this, the more we can get, the better, because I think that will then help us in terms of getting a localized approach. I mean, from some of the work that we do, particularly around kind of ethnicity, but also I think it'd be interesting to capture data around urban and rural communities as well, especially with the makeup of Kent. And you mentioned Gresham. I've already reached out to colleagues at the ICB, because I'm particularly concerned, particularly North Kent, particularly amongst the ethnic communities, in terms of suicide, particularly amongst men of a certain age. And I feel there's more that we could be doing. And the specific question I had was around the kind of real-time suicide data that you're collecting, and I think that's really helpful. Is there a possibility in the future that there could be a trigger point where you're concerned maybe there's certain stuff going on in, I don't know, Gresham, Dartford, Medway, wherever, where you may want to get partners together and see how we could maybe cascade information out and kind of support each other kind of in real time? Just from my experience, particularly working with minority communities, obviously suicide, I mean, it's a stigma in every community, but people really don't want to talk about it. I've been to people's houses where someone's committed suicide, but the family do not want to admit that it is suicide. So I think it's really important that we all kind of work together around this, particularly where we are in the calendar as well. When we get into January, February, we know sometimes there is a spike.
Yes.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the capturing of ethnicity data and suicide is nationally a big problem. We have to work very closely with coroners around that. And it was very moving when I went to the Gurdwara to speak to the community there. And, it's that capturing of information. And that's why I think I'd really like to move to locality prevention strategies. So we can do quite a lot, Kent and Medway. I mean, there's a lot we've done, as you can see, but that real local mobilisation of the community and the knowledge that's locked there, I think that would be really useful. But of course, that's got to be translated into really clear pathways of help as well. And that's something that we need to do Kent and Medway wide. So it's both. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Jackie C.
Thank you. I know we have a good reputation for our suicide prevention strategy in Kent and Medway, but I suppose my ruminations are about impact. Incredibly difficult to kind of demonstrate an impact, but also just to achieve one, nationally, not just locally. And so I suppose I was wondering which part of the comprehensive programme you think really touches on sort of effective prevention? Or if I phrase it in an easier way, because that's quite a tricky question, you've gone for breadth and trying to touch, the main bases. And I suppose there's just a question, would we be more effective if we were a little bit more ruthless about focus and depth, so that domestic violence, substance misuse and debt, for example, or domestic violence and substance misuse as a kind of target area? So it's a genuine question really about how do we really get traction on the rate and whether we should go for breadth or depth or what really works.
Jackie, we've got to do everything. But I said in my initial presentation, if we can do two things really well in terms of health services, that would be preventing the second suicide. So that's self-harm and those presentations at hospital. And again, Jackie, that's do we know about if people go to emergency departments with a self-harm episode, do we know what happens to them 72 hours later? Do we know what happens to them a month later and 6 months later? So that's follow-up. So I would say that would be a really clear thing to do. I think the second thing would be depression. Have we got a clear depression pathway? Or not, I don't like the word pathway. Have we got a clear way of tackling the rise in depression between us all? And I think the third thing is tackle health inequalities, because we know, and this is fairly robust evidence, that if we tackle those health inequalities in those local areas, the mental health improves. So I think that's your three things. And all the other things around domestic abuse, around substance misuse, we already are, as a whole system, also tackling that. So it's not that I would choose one thing above other. I would get the bits that we aren't doing right.
Thank you. Stephen, and then I've got something, and then we'll wrap up because we're 7 minutes over already. Stephen.
This is the first of these meetings that I've been in where a topic has come up twice. So I would like to say how grateful I am to colleagues for the persistent attention to this area. We heard from Tim Woodhouse more than a year ago, and I caught up with him after that. We had a particular conversation about children in Maidstone because there'd been a number of incidents there. Picking up on Shane's point, I'd like to very much endorse what he said about whether we are appropriately speaking about resilience and categorisation. And I think the novel thing that I would like to bring into the conversation is, as a secondary school teacher, I've seen great improvement in the way in which the awareness in the institutions has been raised. We have an amber list that comes around to us regularly. It's a completely new initiative compared with when I first started teaching, where you are alerted to persons who may be of concern. So it therefore occurs to me that younger age groups of people have been better catered for, and we need to do some catching up at the other end to give a foil to the points that were made previously. Nevertheless, with the LGR train coming towards us and a reduction in this, that and the other, the resilience needs to apply to councils, councillors, our ability to be holding hands with our communities, and that is a conversation that I would like to carry on afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Final thing for me, I'm breaking my rules. My rule is only ever wear 2 badges, but I'll make an exception today. And yeah, blimey, if we ever wanted to have awareness of suicide across our region, we did it magnificently, collectively. And again, let me take an opportunity to say a huge thank you to everyone who made that happen. It didn't just happen by itself. Picking up on Shane's point, I don't want to go into quoting lyrics from the 80s, but children are our future, so we need to teach them well. And of course, one of the things nationally that's helped with this is the 3 Dads Walking campaign. So, and I guess not for answering now, but if there's an obligation for every secondary school in England to be teaching suicide prevention, are we collectively confident, because there's no one from education around this table, are we collectively confident that's happening? Question mark. And then secondly, whatever individuals' views are on this, there is an international pilot scheme, which is legislation in Australia, which is doing some pretty radical stuff on social media content, which for not every young person, Shane's right, we can't kind of go, all young people think this, that is not the case. But they've clearly taken a legislative position to say, we think this is having disproportionate impacts. My presumption and my question is that professionals like your good selves and others across the country will be looking on with interest as to what comes from Australia. Again, there may be people around this table who fundamentally disagree with it, and that's fine. It's not our laws, it's the laws of another country. But if that's going to reduce incidents of suicide in young people, and there's some empirical evidence from that in due course, I want to hear about it, and I want to be confident that our brilliant professionals are looking at that. So those are my contributions. Back to you.
Well, look, I mean, you can't disagree with that. I think the internet's a tool, isn't it? It's a space, and it's a good and a bad thing. It's not a one thing or another. However, when we had in Kent a conference on online safety in 2014-15, one of the lead speakers there said a really powerful thing, which I just think is worth sharing, which is the internet's a space. You wouldn't allow your 12-year-old child to just get on a train and go to Birmingham or go to Edinburgh on their own, unsupervised, because you never know what they might encounter on the way. But we allow people to go into those uncharted spaces alone. And I suppose that's, you know, to think of the internet as a space. And yeah, it'd be interesting to know what the evidence brings up on that.
And I say, I appreciate that, but maybe some people go, it's fundamental breach of human rights, blah, blah, blah. And we know there'll be some young people who are far more intelligent than I that have bought their own VPN and are doing their own thing. That would be a tiny percentage. I say, for me, sat in this chair, if it can reduce incidents of suicide in teenagers, that's a good thing. And we should collectively as a system learn from that. Thank you for the presentation, the information and everything else that's shared. The link for the video, I think, is within the presentation, so I'd encourage colleagues to have a look at that as appropriate. Let's then move on to the final parts of today's agenda. Just for clarity, obviously we've never had a public question. We did receive 3 questions, but they were KCC focused on an issue which wasn't really of the purview of this committee, so they've been dealt with outside that. But for the record, we did receive questions, but they weren't, let's say, they weren't appropriate for this forum, but they're being dealt with elsewhere. I'm happy to do a quick sweep, unusually for me, because Medway colleagues will know I hate any other business. Is there anything else people wish to raise today? No. Thank you for that. Can I say 3 things quickly in closing? Firstly, we've talked about already information style format for the next meeting. That has been heard. I know will be recognised. Said in one of your contributions earlier, you spoke around looking at the strategy. I think there's a question around looking at the ICP as an institution with both the current situation nationally. We haven't got a timescale as to when government are looking to make changes to this, but we know it's coming. And we know at points, colleagues in KCC in particular have indicated their focus will be elsewhere, particularly on health and wellbeing boards. Say, in Medway we've had both, but so I think an item around that will be helpful, I think, to give some clarity to colleagues as we get close to effectively what would be the end of my term as chair. Anyway, I'd have one more meeting after that before Lyndon, in theory, should become chair of this. So I'm happy to suggest that's an agenda item for the 31st of March. And my final duty is to wish you all a very happy Christmas and a lovely new year when it gets here. You've got lots of work to do before then, though, I'm afraid. Sorry about that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the team for looking after us today. Thanks.